The DP-420 exam is designed for individuals who want to demonstrate their expertise in designing and implementing cloud-native applications using Microsoft Azure Cosmos DB. Candidates are expected to have a deep understanding of cloud-native applications and Microsoft Azure Cosmos DB. The exam consists of multiple choice questions and lasts for 150 minutes. The cost of the exam is $165. Microsoft certification DP-420 exam questions are valuable in your preparation. Share some Microsoft DP-420 exam dumps questions here. 1. You plan to create an Azure Cosmos DB account that will use the NoSQL API. You need to create a grouping strategy for items that will be stored in the account. The solution must ensure that write and read operations on the items can be performed within the same transact. What should you use to group the items? A. Logical partitions. B. Physical partitions. C. Databases. D. Containers. 2. You need to create a database in an Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account. The database will contain 3 containers named Call1, Call2 and Call3. The Call1 container will have unpredictable read and write volumes. The Call2 and Call3 containers will have predictable read and write volumes. The expected maximum throughput for Call1 and Call2 is 50,000 request units per second, RU/s, each. How should you provision the collection while minimizing costs? A. Create a provisioned throughput account. Set the throughput for Call1 to manual. Set the throughput for Call2 and Call3 to autoscale. B. Create a provisioned throughput account. Set the throughput for Call1 to autoscale. Set the throughput for Call2 and Call3 to manual. C. Create a serverless account. 3. You have a database named DB1 and Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account named Account1. You need to write JSON data to DB1 by using Azure Stream Analytics. The solution must minimize costs. Which should you do before you can use DB1 as an output of Stream Analytics? A. In account, add a private endpoint. B. In DB1, create containers that have a custom indexing policy and analytical store disabled. C. In account, enable a dedicated gateway. D. In DB1, create containers that have an automatic indexing policy and analytical store enabled. 4. You have an Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account that has multiple write regions. You need to receive an alert when requests that target the database exceed the available request units per second, RU/s. Which Azure Monitor signal should you use? A. Region removed. B. Document quota. C. Metadata requests. D. Data usage. 5. You are implementing an Azure Data Factory dataflow that will use an Azure Cosmos DB SQL API sync to write a dataset. The dataflow will use 2000 Apache Spark partitions. You need to ensure that the ingestion from each Spark partition is balanced to optimize throughput. Which sync setting should you configure? A. Throughput. B. Write throughput budget. C. Batch size. D. Collection action. 6. You have a container named Container. In an Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account. You need to provide a user named User1 with the ability to insert items into Container1 by using role-based access. The solution must use the principle of least privilege. Which roles should you assign to user 1? A. Cosmos DB built-in data contributor only. B. Cosmos DB operator only. C. Document DB account contribute only. D. Document DB account contributor and Cosmos DB built-in data contributor. 7. You have an Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account named Account 1 that has a single read-write region and one additional read region. Account 1 uses the strong default consistency level. You have an application that uses the eventual consistency level when submitting requests to Account 1. How will writes from the application be handled? A. Writes will use the strong consistency level. B. Azure Cosmos DB will reject writes from the application. C. The write order is not guaranteed during replication. D. Writes will use the eventual consistency level. 8. You have an Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account. The change feed is enabled on a container named invoice. You create an Azure function that has a trigger on the change feed. What is received by the Azure function? A. All the properties of the updated items. B. Only the partition key and the changed properties of the updated items. C. All the properties of the original items and the updated items. D. Only the changed properties and the system-defined properties of the updated items. 9. You have operational data in an Azure Cosmos OB for NoSQL database. Database users report that the performance of the database degrades significantly when a business analytics team runs large Apache Spark-based queries against the database. You need 10 reduce the impact that running the Spark-based queries has on the database users. What should you implement? A. Azure Synapse Link. B. A default consistency level of consistent prefix. C. A default consistency level of strong. D. The Spark connector. 10. You have a database named DB1 in an Azure Cosmos DB. If you have a third-party application that is exposed through, you need to migrate data from the application to a. What should you use? A. Database Migration Assistant. B. Azure Data Factory. C. Azure Migrate.